Hi, Jeremy Cordeaux in the Court of Public Opinion. I'm just on air here to let you know that we'll be live streaming the Court of Public Opinion every Friday between 9 o'clock and 12 on jeremycordeaux.com. Please join us. We'd love to have you.
In my youth, the term diet invariably conveyed a focus on weight loss. Our family didn't adhere to a specific cultural dietary regime, and health wasn't linked to nutritional needs during that period. We often found ourselves entangled with the concept of a diet which carries both favourable and unfavourable implications. With the passage of time, I've observed the diverse interpretations and references associated with the concept of diet. At times, these dietary practices can be harmful, exerting restrictions that impact both our physical and mental well-being. So what does the word diet mean to you? On one hand, dieting can represent a conscious effort to make healthier food choices, while on the other hand, it can be associated with restrictive eating patterns, fad diets, and unrealistic weight loss expectations. The understanding and interpretation of the word diet can vary widely amongst individuals and different cultures. In the contemporary society, the term diet typically refers to habitual eating pattern of an individual or community. It encompasses not only the types of food and quantities consumed, but also cultural, social, and personal aspects of eating. It can be approached from different perspectives. It can be a focus on the nutritional concept of the food consumed. Some individuals adopt specific diets for health reasons. Diets can be influenced by cultural and societal norms, traditions, and trends. The term diet is also used to describe a broader lifestyle choice related to foods, such as vegetarianism, veganism, paleo, or Mediterranean diets. These choices often extend beyond mere nutritional considerations and can be influenced by ethical, environmental, or philosophical beliefs. Now, different personalities can approach diets in a variety of ways too. For example, let's take a look at judging and perceiving types. As we know, judging types tend to be organised, structured, and prefer planned and orderly approaches to life. They enjoy closure, resolution, and have a strong sense of duty and responsibility. Judging types may be more likely to stick to a planned, structured diet. They might prefer meal planning, set eating schedules, and organised grocery shopping. Following a specific diet plan or regime could be appealing for their desire for order and control. Whereas perceiving types are more flexible and spontaneous and adaptable, they prefer to go with the flow and are open to new experiences. Perceiving types might be more open to trying different diets and experimenting with different foods. They might be comfortable with a less structured eating routine, enjoying the flexibility that new foods or eating when they feel like it bring. It doesn't necessarily mean they have unhealthy eating habits, it just refers to a preference for spontaneity. How does this feel for you as either a judging type or a perceiving type preference? However, it is crucial to consider individual needs, personal health goals, allergies, ethical considerations, and cultural influences that can also impact dietary choices. Always consult with a healthcare professional or registered dietitian for personalised advice based on individual health needs and goals. I'm Kate Mason, and welcome to Parenting and Personalities. This is the podcast that connects you to the ones you care about the most. Today I'm talking to Chanel Kenner. Chanel completed her education in nutrition and dietetics at California State University, Northridge. Before returning to school for nutrition science, Chanel worked in advertising and marketing in both brand and agency sides for 12 years. Chanel believes that food is about much more than nutrition. It's how we nourish our bodies, minds, and relationships. She wants to free her clients from diet culture. As a dietitian, Chanel helps clients develop a healthy and sustainable relationship with food that lasts their lifetime. Chanel loves travelling with her husband and 2 daughters in her free time. Hi Chanel, it's lovely to have you here on the show. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. Now, first of all, I would really love for you to tell me about you and your family and how you became a dietitian and you wanted to help people with eating disorders, and it's now kind of a focus on developing positive environments and habits in children.
Yes.
Phew, big question.
Well, how far should we go back? No, how much time do we have? It's actually a pretty interesting segue. My best place to start is actually my own eating disorder. When I was 14, when I developed anorexia, I was a figure skater. I was very advanced in figure skating. I had done it my entire childhood from kindergarten. So it was an integral part of my life. And I was able to recover. My parents were a very involved part of that process. And it actually wasn't until years later that I considered eating disorders as a space that I wanted to work in after I was so far removed from it. So I actually worked in advertising, marketing, and entertainment throughout my 20s. Completely different career, very, very different than nutrition. And when I was 29, my dad was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And he's alive today. So it's a happy story. And it really just inspired in me just this desire to take care of myself and get, back on track with my own health. I had spent the better part of my 20s in Los Angeles living as you would expect a 20 something to live. I went out a lot. My social life was very active. I drank and did things that, that just had fun. And so I really wanted to get onto a track of taking better care. So I'd known one extreme of, being very too restrictive, and then the opposite end of just being a little carefree. Wanted to bring it back to the center. So I didn't have actual plans to work in eating disorders. As luck would have it, they found me again in my 30s just through talking to women on social media. I went back to school in my early 30s for nutrition, realizing I really wanted to pursue this. I was really interested in it, understanding how the body works. And so I had both of my daughters while I was pursuing this
Phew.
career, which is it
That
was
is
a
hard
lot.
work.
Yes, as my husband will tell you, it was quite a bit. So I actually pursued this through most of my 30s. And as I talked to women on social media, because I was building my platform during that time, I started to notice a trend, just a lot of women disliking their bodies and not and working against their bodies, doing a lot of the diets and the fads and things that really don't promote a healthy metabolism, positive self-image. And I realized the only difference between the women I was talking to and my younger self was just a diagnosis, right? My behaviors that I engaged in were just not diagnosed because these were people who were not presenting in an emaciated or underweight body, but were more or less doing the same. So I became very passionate about eating disorders and disordered eating, which are so prevalent in our culture. We'll talk a lot, I'm sure, about just how prevalent they are. And as a mom of two girls, I have a 5-year-old and a 16-month-old, and I really feel a strong desire to help them grow up in a world that is free of this diet culture and having a
Absolutely.
positive self-regard.
Thank you for sharing that with us. So, the thing about your eating disorder back in the time, of course, you're working in a sport that really requires a certain weight and a certain look, which is,
Yes.
obviously a huge stress in those areas, ballerinas, the whole works of that type of structure. What was it that, like I know a lot of people who are anorexic or ex-anorexics. What was it that actually brought you out of it? Because it's really hard. It's there's all different kinds of anorexia for different reasons. In the sense of what was it that you decided? No, I want to be well.
I love this question because the answer is simple, but the work was not. So it really was a matter of getting sick of being sick.
Right.
And it needed to be on my terms. My parents were very good at reaching a point where they realized trying to help me get better and recover was not working, and it needed to be on my terms. So they removed themselves from the equation,
Mhm.
and I got to be in full control. And so when I decided I wanted to be well, I wanted boys in school to think I was pretty and not be this, you know, person that people are afraid of because I was so thin and frail. And yeah, I wanted to be healthy. So it very much was a decision that took work. But once I made that decision, there was no turning back.
And is that the advice that you give to people who have eating disorders or come to you because their children have eating disorders in that sense? Is that something you say to them? Look, give it back to them, and even though as a parent the fear must be huge, to give it back to your child.
Yes. Well, there is keeping them safe.
Mm.
And my parents, any other parent, would do what is needed to keep your child safe. If your if you're orthostatic, if your vitals are out of whack, you need to get care. You need to become weight stable. So, um, different like therapy and recovery modalities work to restore weight, but then from there, it really needs to become a collaborative process where the sufferer is in the driver's seat.
Yeah, I really like that idea. In fact, I was speaking to someone the other day whose daughter's in a similar place, and she was trying to organize everything, and her daughter had said to her, I need to do this. And I said to her, you need to listen.
Yeah. I mean, eating disorders are so rooted in control. That is what there's obviously a lot of other underlying reasons and causes, family dynamics, et cetera. But they're really about control. And the more you try to take it away, it makes things worse. So,
yeah. So do you have parents come to you of children or people who have eating disorders come to you to say, hey, listen, I really need help here? What's your kind of market? Not market, that's the wrong word. What's your kind of client in this sense?
Yeah. So my typical client, I would say primarily I work with adolescents and teens. So I work in both residential treatment, dual diagnosis at various locations throughout Los Angeles. And there's a lot of disordered eating and eating disorders there. And then in private practice, usually it's referrals from therapists or pediatricians in that space. And so it's usually parents who are seeking the support for their minors. And so it's a lot more the parents seeking the help. And in residential, I'm both the most loved and the most feared person there because for the ones who are on meal plans, because they need to have their plates checked and percentages checked off to make sure they're eating enough. They don't like me because I make them eat food.
Do they end up loving you at the end of it when they're on their way out? Like, or how many full recoveries are there often? Like, what's your percentage on that?
Well, I couldn't give you an exact percentage because I think it's a ongoing process. And, I've seen tremendous improvements, and I have seen actively choosing recovery every day, but I think it's more accurate to call it a daily choice to choose recovery.
Yeah.
So I couldn't give you an exact percentage, but
no,
the stats are pretty high for choosing recovery and staying in recovery. It's definitely a reality. So if anyone is listening, parents, sufferers, they should know that it is actually achievable. And I'm living proof of that also, over
you are
almost,
you are.
oh my gosh, 25 years recovered. So.
And I think for someone in that situation to be dealing with someone who actually has gone through it and recovered is a really valuable thing to have. It's like watching what you can be. And I think that's really, really important too, because you also know those feelings and the depths that you reach and how you need, how you came out of it yourself.
I do. At the same time, I think what's helpful that I'm so far away from it is that it was like a different time of my life. So I remember enough to be relevant and to be able to support in ways that maybe those who haven't gone through it themselves. But it's also important to note that each person's experience is very different. So while I might have presented with X symptoms and dealt with things in a certain way, it's going to be very, very different with clients that I work with. So I learn a lot every single day from the people I work with, which keeps it interesting and it keeps me honest because, I have to learn from them and be open.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, because I know I had a daughter, who was growing up and she ended up having health problems and I had to take sugar out of her diet. And it's really hard to remove things like that and be conscious that you don't want to say you're on a diet that So I was fortunate enough to be able to use, she was high for type 2 diabetes at 13.
Mhm.
So I just went in and probably not correctly, but showed her pictures of the end of diabetes type 2 and what it looked like, and just said to her, we're switching sugar out of your diet. This is how we do it. And she lost 10 kilos straight away, felt good, and went on from there. But had I, my greatest fear was, cutting back food at that age, mentioning diets at that age, but we got through it and that was all great. But it is a really hard time, and teenagers are really harder at that. And there's a lot of pressures in their life compared with when I was young, a lot of pressures, Insta, all of those perfect people in the perfect world.
And influencers don't even look like influencers. They have so many
Right.
editing tools and things that they use now. AI has become a big issue in the eating disorder world for sure. So yeah, it's not easy. I wouldn't want to be a teenager right now. So I definitely feel for them.
No.
Yeah. And there's a big difference between having a health condition that you need to make dietary changes for. Right. I'm actually pre-diabetic, something I discovered recently. There's something with my family and our pancreas. My dad had pancreatic cancer. His mom had type 2. So there are things we can't control. And I'm sure we'll talk a bit about food shaming and some of those things. But I think it's important to keep in mind that not all health things are like personal responsibility. There are big genetic components. If I can stay in pre-diabetes range, that's actually success. That means that I'm doing
Yes.
well. And looking at me, you would never think that because of what we envision type 2 or, pre-diabetes looking like. But here we
That's
are.
a really valid point. Yeah, that's a really valid point because, there is so much type 2 diabetes out there these days, and some of it is food orientated, but understanding that it can be actually part of your physiology. It's not necessarily, that's a really good thought. So when we talk about foods, we really are into healthy, unhealthy, that's good and bad. And so when we talk about a diet, diet, I say to people, what does diet bring to mind for you? Now, from my time, culturally, I don't have a specific diet, and diet was dieting. It was being thin, dieting. But diet has such a wide range of nuances these days. It's very different world that we're in. What do those words health and diet mean to you? And if you find them kind of destructive sometimes in a way, what words do you use instead?
That's a really good question. So, yeah, I think health is it's a moving target, and it really is a continuum. We like to think of health as being what we do, right? And that gives us some sense of control in it, and that's comforting. And I really understand that. We want to be healthy. We all want to be healthy and live lives that feel good. When we reduce nutrients and foods to health versus unhealth, it's an oversimplification of what we get from food. For example, Oreos, we might think of that as a quote unquote bad or quote unquote junk food based on, cultural messaging. But we actually get carbohydrates, we get sugar from that. And that's our body's quick energy source. That's something great for most people, but also athletes. If I have an athlete, eating something like Oreos is a great energy source before running a sprint, right? So everything can provide us with nutrition. It's just the way that we think about it. Rather than talk about things in terms of health, I like to talk about it more in terms of well-being and how we feel. And that can change daily. So I really encourage clients to check in meal over meal, day over day with how they feel. If we're not feeling well, something's off, right? Maybe we didn't get enough sleep. Maybe we need more hydration. Maybe we need to rest. Maybe we're doing too many things. Rarely is food the central reason why things are going well or unwell. It's a response. We use food to cope, or we use food to restrict. We use it in different ways um, to cope with things around us. So I think there's a lot of different aspects to health than just what we do, and we have to consider those things as well. And mental health is a big part of that.
Absolutely. So, what kind of eating do you promote, like with foods? Because, of course, out there, look, my kids have been additive and preservative free since they were 10 and 12, right? And so, I actually noticed a lot of behavioral changes that came with that, as well as health changes. So, the kind of food that's out there at the moment that's been throwing out to Americans and Australians, we're all in it. A lot of that stuff actually isn't healthy for our kids and for us. So what kind of eating do you promote? Do you promote non, because we're not trying not to be specific about things, but there are certain things that I definitely wouldn't eat and I wouldn't give my family. So what do you promote about eating in that sense?
Right. So I use intuitive eating and mindful eating are the main frameworks that I use. And they're all built around body connection. Nutrition and movement are a part of it. I kind of walk this interesting line between this anti non diet space that a lot of people who work in my area walk. And I wouldn't say that I'm diet culture. I'm very much in the middle. I think, to your point, I've seen firsthand because I do work in dual diagnosis. I've seen people with issues with substance use and how food can become a replacement for eating disorder behaviors and back and forth. So, this idea that food doesn't have an impact, I think, is a model that we have to stop using in the disordered eating space. I don't think it's helpful for our clients, patients. Um, Teaching that food is powerful, that it's helpful, it does support our mental health, it's important. In the same breath, I think it's important to make space for joy. And that is including all foods that we enjoy that fit within our health needs, our preferences, our budget, our family's needs. There are many factors that contribute. So, having a healthy relationship with food, I would say, is just as important as the food that we're putting in our body. So, I do kind of walk in this very middle of the road, like middle ground road that a lot of anti-diet uh, dietitians and therapists probably wouldn't agree with me on some things. But I believe firmly in promoting health and doing things that are supportive of that, getting movement in. But movement doesn't have to be going to a gym and lifting heavy weights or using it in this punishment reward system that can be very damaging to our relationship and also prevent us from having sustainable activity with it. So, finding things you enjoy, finding more play. I think as adults, we lose that. As kids, it's built into your life. And as we get older, we sit more, we work all day. So finding moments to, I saw a video of a mom online just in her pool doing some dancing in her pool to music. And I thought, what a fun way to incorporate movement that's not set in some calorie burning mindset or, really you could tell she was just feeling it. So
And I agree with you. And I'm kind of, I'm 62 and I'm looking at Dan Buettner, who is the Blue Zones person, and he's
yes.
looking at the people that live to be 100, and it's
Mhm.
incidental exercise that is the
Oh,
winner
yeah.
on that. Like you say, it's having fun, it's going for that walk down the road, it's being in your garden, doing one of those things, which the exercise philosophy is go to the gym and like you say, structured. Whereas if we find incidental exercise in our lives. I totally agree with that. And I think it's lovely to be on the border of all that, because the thing is that not everybody can buy good food all the time. Not everybody has children that eat properly. It's really hard once you start going, this is good and bad, and parental guilt is huge in most people. If I'm doing this incorrectly, I'm doing that incorrectly. So I do love that flow that you have of sitting in the middle, and I think that people find their way. So for me, I found what I did just because my kids were sick all the time. And often the sad part is that what I've found throughout life is it's not until you get sick that you actually start looking at what are your behaviors and how healthy you are. It's
It is very, very true. And I actually forgot a point. You brought up a really good one about access, and also um, I a thought I had was about the ARFID population I work with, which is an eating disorder not well understood or talked about, which is avoidant restrictive food intake disorder. It's really selective eating. It for a long time was called selective eating disorder, and for mostly kids, adolescents that I work with who have it, eating goldfish for breakfast might be what they need to do because that's the only food that sounds appetizing and it will work for them and they need energy. So we really have to consider things like that when we talk about health and unhealth, that some people do have conditions that make it very challenging to enjoy a wide variety of foods or any food at all. So, um, and then of course
Just for people listening,
access.
just for people listening, Chanel's actually not talking about real goldfish, because I do understand that goldfish is a biscuit in the States, isn't it?
Oh, yes. That's probably an
No,
important
it's
one to
just really
clarify. They're a cheese cracker that are shaped like a fish. They're delicious.
yes.
So yeah. But
Yeah. No, and I understand that too, and sometimes it's just preservation too of getting something into your child.
yeah.
Now you've got 2 young now when we talk about food shaming, go back to food shaming. So tell me about that.
Yeah. So food shaming is actually a really big thing in schools. I see this in elementary schools where I'll have clients tell me this hasn't happened to my daughter quite yet. She's in kindergarten and very new. So I haven't heard anything about judgment about what's in her lunch, but I have heard from clients that other kids, their peers, will say, "Oh, you're eating junk," or "That's gross. I wouldn't eat it," and making comments to other kids about it. So really shaming what they're having, not realizing, well, that could, you know, be from a low income family and that might be what they have available to them, or they might have RFID, or they might have some other health condition that prevents them from having some other foods. So it's really important, I think, that parents consider the ways we talk about food. They matter, and promoting a like positive um, conversation about foods, that not good, bad, but what if we could talk about just food being joyful, or we don't necessarily even have to talk about those things at all unless they ask. Leaving space for your kids to ask questions and have it more of a conversation is a great way to talk about things like nutrition, because for young kids it's not really helpful. They don't understand it. Like, what does healthy mean? So, so yeah, I think shame and the ways we talk about food, our kids listen and they pick up on it and they repeat it.
Yeah. Yeah. They do. And I've never heard of that in that sense. And wow, for people listening, that's really, really important because we do as parents, oh, this is a healthy lunch and you're having, and they looking at like the thought of looking in some other kid's lunchbox and then putting down their food because that's what you've heard from your parents. And as you will know now, having small children, they are mini me's, they listen, and the things they come out with, if they're in tune with everything you're saying, and you might think it's not, but they hear everything and it does connect. And I just think that's really a fascinating thing I've never heard of. So I think that's very important to know, even for me to pass on to my children, that these type of things happen. They haven't had their children yet, but, all of this stuff does influence moving forward. So what's it, as a mother, now, what ways are you going to try to ensure that your children have a really good attitude around food and the intake of food?
Well, some of the things that work really well in our home, I really follow the Ellyn Satter method to feeding. So, Ellyn Satter is a dietitian and also a psychotherapist based in the States in US. And she developed really the foundations of baby led weaning and promoting autonomy with food and food choices. So, kind of going back to this idea of um, self control, freedom to make your own choices. So, she developed this concept called the division of responsibility. And it's what I teach parents, it's what I promote, it's what I do. And the idea is that you, as the parent, decide what is served, when it's served, and where it's served. Your children get to decide what from the options that are available they will have and how much. So we take a very hands-off approach in my house to how much they're eating and actually what they're eating. So there are times when I will offer my daughter a hot dog or a chicken, and she's going to eat the hot dog, but she's also going to eat all the vegetables on her plate too, and she does. And it's because I don't talk about them as being healthy or unhealthy. I serve them. And she has a choice to eat them or not. And a lot of times she's asking me for salad. She's asking for more vegetables. I've seen it work, so I know it does in my own home. And I've also seen it work in my work with clients. So that can be really scary for parents, giving up control. Now, one thing I will say, it's always a good idea to serve at least one food that you know they'll eat because they need food. They need energy. And I'll always serve milk usually with at least dinner. So I know that they're getting nutrition. So that removes any of the fear of getting protein and carbohydrates and heart healthy fats and all of those things. So they get that. And then I leave room for experimenting and exploring. So as a parent, we get to decide what's served. It's up to no one else but you to decide that. But giving them some
That's
sense
yeah,
of control.
choice.
Yeah.
I like that because these days, as an older person who parented in the old days as such, looks like it now. What we used to do was take the choice out of things, and that worked for us. And these days, we watch parents giving so many choices to their kids that they can't make a choice. Children are overwhelmed with. We have indoor swim schools, right? And some parents will say, "What day would you like to swim this week?" And they're talking to a 3-year-old. And we say, "Well, you're the parent, you make the choices." So you're still as a parent making choices, but you're allowing them to choose what they eat out of the choices you've made.
Yes. Well,
Is
even
that correct?
adults don't
Yeah.
do well with having too many choices. You get into analysis paralysis and end up making no decision at all. Or you choose something just, because so we don't make choices confidently that way, and our kids don't either. So you're giving limited choices, 2, 3 things, and from that, they get to decide. It also helps them, the actual quantity piece, it allows them to connect with their bodies. So energy balance is a really complicated thing that we can't perfectly calculate. I had to learn it in school, but it's not a system that I generally use unless I need to help someone get weight restored or there is actually a component for someone's health to use that, or to determine protein needs, things like that. But generally speaking, our appetites are the greatest, determining factor in what our energy needs are. And exercise, things like that are not like a one-to-one exchange. We treat it that way with our fitness watches and calorie trackers and everything else, but that's not exactly how it works. And it really disconnects people from their body. I see too many people who are just way too disconnected from their physical signals and understanding like what enough feels like and when something else might make them feel better, when watching one of their favorite shows or talking to a friend or doing a puzzle. There are other things sometimes that could be more satisfying than um, having the food thing. And then there's times when the food thing is the thing we want, like ice cream. Everyone loves
Yes.
that.
Loves ice cream. So really, I have to wrap it up now. I really hate to do this. So really, intuition, and a lot of it is listening to yourself, loving yourself. Number one, really loving who you are, and listening to yourself, listening to your body, trying to work out whether really the feeling for food is an anxious feeling or a feeling that you're in the cupboard because you're stressed about something versus actual hunger, and just not to be out of control or not to be too controlled or out of control around food in
Yeah.
that sense.
Natural
Yeah.
self-regulation is built by developing a healthy relationship with food. And then we get to fill in nutrition, right? Nutrition is important, but it really needs to be a part of this system of trusting and listening to our bodies.
Thank you so much for being on today and sharing your story and the wonderful work that you're doing. And I think it's going to be a real eye-opener and real help to a lot of people who are listening.
Thank you so much for having me.
Chanel believes, and I quote, that you need the right nutritional support for right now. Health begins with how you feed yourself, emotionally, mentally, and physically. The long-lasting commitment component requires a foundational shift in focus and conversation, from diet and reward to love and nourishment. At my core, I believe in human connection through love in every form, starting with ourselves. Everyone deserves a healthy, balanced life. I'm Kate Mason. Thank you for listening to Parenting and Personalities. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you could leave a rating and a review that would help others learn about this podcast. If you're interested in discovering more about you and your family's personality types, you'll find my book, Who Is This Monster or Treasure in My House, on Booktopia or Amazon. If you have an episode idea, please send a note to thepersonalitycoach@gmail.com. And many thanks to our producers at Stories and Strategies, and we'll see you next time.
Hi, Jeremy Cordeaux in the Court of Public Opinion. I'm just on air here to let you know that we'll be live streaming the Court of Public Opinion every Friday between 9 o'clock and 12 on jeremycordeaux.com. Please join us. We'd love to have you.